In this lesson, I want to take a look at some different font styles that we can use. So far, all of our documents have used a default style for most everything, and that includes font size and the font setting itself. So first I want to make some changes to the sizes used for our text. I'm still working with the styles-sample HTML file, so over here in the document, I'll add a style attribute to the first paragraph here, and for the property I'll type font-size. We can use a number of different ways to measure the font size. The easiest one to start with is just small, medium, and large. The default size our browsers use is medium, so I'll set this one to large. Let's add another one to our second paragraph. And this time I'll use XX-small. Now we'll just save the document. And let's go over to our browser to see how that looks. Now, if we use the third paragraph as a comparison, we can see that the first paragraph is larger, and the second paragraph is much smaller. Using this measurement system, the sizes we can use are XX small, X small, small, medium, large, X large, and XX large. Now, in addition to the relative size categories, we can also set the font using a direct measurement. Each measurement uses its own abbreviation. For inches, you use IN, for centimeters, CM, and for just pixels, you can use PX. Now, it's not a great idea to use inches or centimeters, since that will be interpreted differently when your users view the page on devices with different resolutions. Most desktop monitors use 72 or 92 pixels per inch, and tablets or phones could use anything from 163 pixels per inch to 401. So when using a direct measurement, it's best to stick with pixels. I'll change the first paragraph from large to 24 pixels. Let me just save that, and we'll go out to our browser again and refresh. Now you can see that first paragraph is pretty big. The default size that we're seeing down here in the third paragraph is usually somewhere around 16 pixels. Now our other font measurement systems are all relatively sized. And they're actually the smartest ones to use in most cases. By relative, I mean that the font is measured relative to the parent element which it's inside of. In our document here, the paragraph and heading tags are all located inside the body tag. And of course, the body tag is located inside the HTML tag. Now there are three main ways we can measure our font size using relative sizing. So let's try them all out here. The first way is to use a percentage. I'll go back to the first paragraph, and I'll set the size this time to 150%. Then I'll set the second paragraph to just 50%. Now let's save our change, and we'll go to the browser and see how that looks. You can see that the first paragraph looks exactly the same. Since our body tag default size is about 16 pixels, then our first paragraph size would be about 24 pixels. And of course the second one would be about 8 pixels, which is a little smaller than it was before. Now if we go back to our document, I'll go inside the style tag, and let's add a rule for the body tag. We'll use our open and close curly brackets, and inside there I'll just use the same font size property, but this time I'll set the value to 24 pixels. Now let's save our change and refresh the browser. And now first notice that our third paragraph and our headings are all also bigger. And with the same 150% settings and 50% settings on the first and second paragraphs, they're bigger as well. What we're seeing here is called inheritance. And it means that normally, if we don't change the settings on an element, it will inherit the settings on its parent. So our normal paragraphs and lists will get the body tag size changes, and of course, the headings will also be larger based on the body tag size as well. Now the second measurement system works in a similar way to percentages, but it's used a little differently. The measurement is called EMS, and instead of the start value being 100%, the start value of the parent size is 1M. So here in the first paragraph, instead of using 150% to get our measurement size, I'll use 1.5 M. Now when I save that change, and we go back out to the browser and refresh the page, you can see that the first paragraph doesn't change at all. So you can use either % or M and get the same result. Now the last measurement we can use is rem, which is short for root M. And although it works in a similar way to our other relative measurement systems, it has one important difference. While % and M's change the size from the parent size, the rem size makes its change starting from the size set for the root element, which for our pages is always the HTML tag. Now imagine a much more complicated page where you have many tags inside of other tags. A list inside a paragraph, paragraphs inside sections, block quotes inside paragraphs, or inside articles, or inside sections. It can get very confusing if you start to make font size changes to these tags when you try to figure out what the final size will be. Since our document is very simple, I could switch to using rems simply by changing the M to rem. Now let's save our changes, and we'll go back out and refresh the browser and see what that does. First, we'll look at our paragraph up at the top. You can see it's quite a bit smaller than before, and that's because in our document, we've not made any changes to the root HTML tag, so it's still the default size, and our 1.5 rem is based on that default size. Now, if we look at the other elements, they're still quite large, and that's because we do have a change to the body tag. And since those other elements inherit from their parent, they're still based on the body tag larger size. Now there is one more important font setting that I want to go over in this lesson, and that is the setting that changes the actual font we want to use for our text. Right now all of our text is displayed using Times New Roman, because that's the default font for almost every browser. I want to switch my page to use Arial font instead, so that the text is a little bit cleaner. First, we'll need to decide where to make our style rule. I could set the style rule in the style attribute for our paragraphs, but then if we want to use the same font on our heading tags and lists, I would need to make a new rule for each one. Here's another place where we can make use of the inheritance from the parent element. I can save time by just changing the body tag style, and then all of the child tags on the page will inherit it, unless they have changes of their own. So I'll just go inside our body tag rule, and I'll add in the font-family property. And then I'll set that to Arial. Now let me point out that if you ever need to use a font that actually has a space in the name of the font, you'll need to put it in quotes. But since Arial is only one word, we don't need the quotes here. Now let's save that change, and we'll go back out to our browser again. This time when I refresh, you can see that all the text on the page, including the lists and the headings, is now shown using the Arial font. Now, if you're following along and you're using a Macintosh browser instead, you might have seen that your browser is still showing Times. Well, that's because not all fonts are available on every operating system for our users. And if your particular system does not have the font available to you, then the browser will just go back to using the default instead. A typical Macintosh operating system has different fonts installed, and it usually includes the Helvetica font, which is similar to Arial. Now I could go back to my document here and type in Helvetica in place of Arial. While that would fix my page for a Macintosh user, it would break it for a Windows user. As web developers, we need to make sure that our page works for every user, not just one platform. So what we do here is we make sure to specify several fonts so that all the users are covered. And that's why this property is called font family. So here, I'll leave Arial in place, and after it, I'll just type a comma. And then I can add in an additional font name. So we'll put in here Helvetica. When the browser renders my page, it will try to use the first font, and if it's not available, then it will try the second. Now our current font family will work for both Macintosh and Windows operating systems. But what if a user is viewing our page using Linux? Well, let's add in a third font, and it's a good idea in all font family values to add in a generic font. In this case, I'll just specify sans-serif. That will tell the browser to just pick a suitable sans-serif font if the first two aren't installed. Now, as you can see, whenever you specify a font for a page, you should always provide a few fallback fonts that are similar so that you can still get the look you want for your page design. Well, now we have a few more styles we can use for our text. In the next lesson, we'll go over changing colors.